Yeah, dude. Let's let's just like hot lead. Let's just get it. Let's go right for it. You ready for this?
Let's do it. Yeah, yeah,
All
I'm
right.
ready.
I literally just got done watching the technique WOD from Barbell Shrugged, where you taught Chris Moore the handstand for the very first time. Take me
I
back.
remember that.
Take me back. What's your perspective?
Yeah, I remember that day. The whole crew showed up. They came in excited, and they were well equipped, and they were ready to go. And I really knew nothing about their show and what they were doing, but they wanted to have me on as a guest, and I thought that was great. And I remember they were joking and saying, "Oh yeah, Chris is gonna do a handstand with you." And I was like, "Cool, yeah, let's do the handstand thing." And yeah, we were just joking around, and then I realized, wait a second, he's actually a little nervous about this. But he wants to try it. And I remember us getting into it, and I realized that he was not nervous, but hesitant on his ability to be able to do something like a handstand. The moment he started to put weight on his hands and he was inverted, and I was like, "Oh, this is cool. This is an actual breakthrough. This is not just for show. It was real." And although we got the handstand, we did the thing. I didn't think much of it until the next time we met, which was, oh yeah, we were giving a talk at Princeton University, and he brought that up again, and I thought, oh wow, this thing really made an impact. And it was cool that such a simple thing for me to be able to share with someone like Chris at that time was so meaningful. And he ended up integrating it into the way that he practiced and to his training. And I just thought it was so cool that with such a simple thing like a handstand, you could get somebody who was really deep into his practice and lifting and training and developing the body, and his thinking and his writing to make some sort of like dent in the way that his process unfolded. To me, that was amazing. Yeah. So
Well, the thing
it's
that
a
like
it's a great memory.
the thing that really stuck out to me is that when I watched the video of you doing it, it takes the video itself is less than 5 minutes long,
Hmm.
and there's no cuts.
No, it's
And
quick.
yeah, very quick. And so that breakthrough happened in such a short amount of time, and I could hear it in his voice. The way he turned when it was the kick. You had him do the kick up for the first time. You go to the lunge. I'm not giving you too much information. We're just dicking around, which I love.
Hmm.
We're just dicking around. And he kicked up and he came out and his eyes were like, and he looked at me and he said, "You're a good coach, man."
He did say that. Yeah, I remember. I remember him saying that.
And it just like the reason that it really stuck out to me is because Chris was hard to impress, especially at this time in his life. He was
Mm-hmm.
hard to impress, right? He's been in the game, like you mentioned. He's gone so deep into his craft, and not just that, but he's so invested in other people that have gone deep in their craft.
Mm-hmm.
And so he was always looking for those threads that lay everything together. And so for someone to kind of just show up and recognize that he's nervous and recognize that this is a moment that y'all are having together and that other
Mm-hmm.
people get to share. And that was the thing that um, attracted me to Chris's work, is like his openness and willing to share those vulnerable moments and seeing an opportunity to step into it and realizing that it's not just for him. He gets to do it for all these other people that are looking up to people like you and people like him and the Barbell Shrug boys and all those people that were coming out of the SF CrossFit era of that time. Is a really, really important moment. And just
Yeah.
yeah, just to give you some back,
Crazy.
it really is crazy, man. And like the context that, just so you know, is even though I'm from Chris's hometown, I'm from Memphis, and I was in the CrossFit community. I did not know Chris personally. I was a fan, and I was actually coaching at another gym, a gym that you might be familiar with. And I know we have a mutual friend, and it'll probably pop right into your mind. But I was a head coach at a gym called Reebok CrossFit Sentinel One in Seoul,
I
South Korea.
know. Okay,
Yes.
there you go.
Yeah. Yeah. And so like, it's like peak, Barbell Shrugged is reaching peak powers, the 2013, 2014 era. And it just made me so proud to see these guys were my hometown, and they were like, they weren't just doing it big, they were doing it all the way big. And they're setting
Mm-hmm.
these like high expectations for what's possible. And honestly, like in a way, granting access and permission to someone like me who's coming up going, well, I'm from Memphis. Not a lot of people know this. And all of a sudden, Tennessee is like the the capital of the CrossFit world. You got Rich Froning over to our left, freaking winning championship after championship. And now Barbell Shrugged's like this cultural epicenter. And I was a true fan. And I remember I only got to meet Chris once. And Miss Diane Fu came to the Memphis area to teach a weightlifting seminar doing the Fu barbell thing. And I went and I was like, oh, I'm just going to eat this up, right? And I was like, oh, right. She knows Biju. And Carl knows Biju. And Biju, Brian, our dear friend. And I was like, I'm just going to make that connection. And the boys had already moved to San Diego, and Chris was in town, and he showed up to just say hello to Diane. He knew that he was going to get like almost no FaceTime with her, and that was it. That's all that he wanted. And I got to talk to Chris about 15, 20 minutes. And when Chris passed away in 2016, the shock of that was very well felt across the industry. And one thing that really stood out to me before I had discovered his solo work is how much people revered Chris that he revered. And one thing that stuck out to me is how much he revered you and your coaching. And so I'm wondering if there's anything that you can speak to that stood out to you about Chris, his philosophy, the way that he approached life, and feel free to riff on that.
Yeah, well, first and foremost, I didn't know Chris beyond the interviews that I've been on, and I think we did 3 interviews, actually 2 where he was here, and then one I did another one on Barbell Shrugged when he had already passed. So I only knew him from those 2 interviews, and then hanging out before and after. So I didn't know him well, and I didn't follow his work. I had my head too far up my own ass to be following anybody. But I did know what he was doing, and when he passed, that was shocking for me because it felt like this is a part of the community that I'm in, and someone who, although I don't know exactly what they're doing and the depth of their work, I could appreciate the effort that was being put in behind the scenes, and it just felt it was shocking. That's all I can say. It was shocking. It was shocking to the point where I think it was maybe a month or 2 after he passed that I stopped following Barbell Shrug, Chris's Instagram handle, Twitter. I just kind of got off of that until I reconnected with his wife, who sent me his book, and that's a big book. And I even told her, I said, you know what? After he passed, I was shocked, and I don't know why. I just didn't want to look at it. I was just sweeping it under the rug. I had completely ignored that that had even happened, or that there was something after his death. And since a lot has unfolded, where his approach to physical development came from a place where his mind was at a level that I didn't realize back then was at, and that's where his handle and his name Barbell Buddha came from. And now understanding, kind of looking back and being like, okay, if he did practice Buddhism, for example, what was true? Well, maybe there were 4 truths. One, that everything in life comes with suffering. Okay, that's one. So he was probably suffering to some degree in his life, and that led him to thinking the way that he was thinking, and that he would put himself in positions that would allow him to suffer, but now in a mindful way. The other truth that was probably very present in his life was that although suffering is there is an opportunity to reach a state of peace and freedom, and that must be done with practice. right? And so he was somebody who was constantly practicing, whether it was in his writing and his thinking and his speaking and his training, and his collaboration, business development. And it's an exciting thing to think back at this, that he was that mindful, he was that aware, and he had a depth in the body of work that I couldn't appreciate until he passed.
Mm. And the thing that really sticks out to me based on those two truths, that like one feeds into two. By
Hmm.
embracing the suffering that is part of life, you do reach that next level where you're able to ascend and use it to be the fuel. And
Hmm.
Chris was always talking about like the war of art, the capital R resistance, and
Yeah.
how it wasn't your enemy, it's your friend. It's the way. And
Hmm.
um, to get like a backdoor access through his podcast and through his books into the process that went into getting to these states, like that to me was the important part of the work, because um, having the context around Chris's death changes the way that you listen and read his material. And
Yeah.
as if you were a fan following him while he was alive, it's like, okay, here's this really cool guy, really smart guy doing some really cool and awesome things. Also things that I like to do, right? That we could have missed. We did miss the subtlety of the work. It was very subtle, and that's what made it
Hmm.
so beautiful. So when I'm sitting down to really get to know Barbell Buddha for the first time, I was in a challenging part of my life. I was experiencing that first truth, that
Hmm.
I was being stretched. I was still in coaching, but I moved out of the gym space and I started a PE program for a charter school.
Hmm.
So I'm working with kids that are navigating tremendous amount of trauma that I didn't have to go through. Right. And I've yet to know myself to the level that actually gave me the ability to hold space for them. So I'm just getting rocked. Right. And I was given the recommendation by a friend, like, man, you just need a little bit more of that routine in the morning. Give yourself a little self-love. I said, okay, that sounds like a good idea. So what I'll do is I'm going to get up and make my favorite thing. I'm going to make a nice, beautiful cup of coffee. I'm going to sit down, do my little breathing practice, and I'm going to maybe put on something that gets me motivated or inspired. And uh, it happened to be the first episode of Barbell Buddha. And
Nice.
I was like, man, I had a great day, you know? I was like, well, let's just do this again. And so I do it again the next day. And it carries me all the way into the weekend, which is normally you sleep in on Saturday. You know, I'll get back to the routine on Monday. And I'm like, man, I'm just loving this too much. And as the days unfolded, you just keep putting one foot in front of the other. And then for 100 straight days, listened to the entire Barbell Buddha catalog.
Wow.
And so over about a little over 3 months, I've taken about 3.5 years of Chris's life and compressed it into that short time frame, which is intense, especially
Hmm.
given the fact that you know that he passes away at the end.
Hmm.
And to hear him describe these things as they were happening, the fear of leaving his medical writing job to pursue this unknown that is Barbell Shrugged and Barbell Buddha full time, the courage that it takes with a baby on the way and a wife and another
Hmm.
son and friends and family that want your best interests at heart. And he's like living it wide open, and he's giving you the keys, man. He gives you the access to the behind the scenes stuff. And that's why I called it Rediscovered. Chris talks about the discovery wheel. And of course he does it in a way that is very cool with training, right? So
Hmm.
you're introduced to something for the first time. You have the discovery, aha, and all the growth just right. You just like everything's new, all the new stimulus. It's just, man, it's happening so fast. And then you hit this intermediate stage that Chris affectionately called the toil phase, because
Hmm.
that's the only way. You got to toil with it, you got to tussle with it. And then you start to hit, if you're lucky, fortunate to make it far in, you start to hit the mastery phase. And it's about then that you get, as Chris said, a little long in the tooth, a little
Mm.
body's not quite working like it used to, but your mind you just start to understand. And then somebody sees the mastery, and then they want to be like you, so they start talking to you, and then you realize, oh man, I have a lot to give. I can
Hmm.
teach, you know. And then when you start teaching and you know that you're teaching beginners, you're like, all right, here are the 5 things you got to know. It's got to be like this and this, and these are the most important things. And you wake up to the realization that you yourself are not practicing those things anymore. And if they
Right.
were so damn important, why aren't you yourself practicing them? And then you go through what he called the rediscovery phase, where the loop gets to start over. And
Mm-hmm.
I felt that way so much with his work. It was like I got to rediscover the context of his work and see how it's important. And the way that it's impacted my life is, I'm sitting here with you right now having a conversation, which is definitely a change compared to a few years ago. But just the way that I live, the way that I take in those small moments, all of the data, the five senses, a lot of that was because Chris was willing to do that. He was willing to talk about it, and he was willing to do it in a time uh, where things like psychedelics or things like some of the more abstract side of Chris's personality are now becoming like more common conversations. And he was
Mm-hmm.
leading those conversations in 12, 13, 14, And um, yeah, I guess it's cool to hear different sides of the coin, because like
Yeah.
you were colleagues and you work together, you have and then you go, I didn't really know Chris that well. And then he passes away, and then you get his book and you're like, oh shit,
Mm-hmm.
what is there? Like man, I remember I wanted to talk to him about kettlebells, man. You know how bad I want to have those 15 minutes back. I was wanting to talk to him because I didn't know. I had a lot more to offer. I just didn't
Mm-hmm.
know that he was open and access to these things. So you live and you learn, and you do your best. But um, I appreciate you sharing so openly about it. Do you have anything else, any nuggets about Chris, about his philosophy? You mentioned four truths. I know we covered two of them.
Yeah, with two. Well, he definitely had some attachments, and I don't know what those were, but I could sense those. That was the other. That was the other truth. And he would bring those up, and you could tell that he was bringing those up, and he was pretty aggressive, and he tried to be funny and comical about it, the way that he did it. Uh, but there's clearly something that he was holding on to, and he knew that he had to release them. But what was clear was that he was always willing. He was always willing to let go of them, and he would do that by, for example, on the podcast, he would allow you to believe that you knew what you were talking about. Right? He's like, "Oh yeah, 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 you're pretty smart," and you're like, "Oh yes, I am. I'm very
Yeah.
smart." Yeah, you start to believe. So he had some attachments,
Mm,
but as I said previously, the other truth is he knew that he could practice to relieve himself from those practices. And then the fourth truth was that um, although there was this persona that he was playing behind the scenes, and I never really got to understand this until he passed away, was that there was bliss on the other side. Like there was this sense of like, yes, there is nirvana if you're a Buddhist, or yes, there is a place of eternal peace, and you can call it heaven, or a connection with your higher self that is in perfect equanimity. And uh, that was there. That was a truth. I simply couldn't see that truth back then. But now, in retrospect, I'm like, oh shit, he was really ahead of me.
mm. Yeah, and he played a good mortal, didn't he?
He did. He did. But I guess that was part of his the playing with suffering and pain and war, and he knew that if he could create contrast, he could squeeze the truth out.
Mm. Yeah,
Yeah,
he
but I
he
think there
often.
was a moment where it changed. It was no longer this aggressive squeezing. It was more like, hey, what if we, instead of pushing, we start to pull away, like we peel back the layers. And I think in his later years, that was starting to happen. And I could just sense that in the way that he was speaking on the podcast and how he was sharing on Instagram. And I know he was excited when they moved to Europe, but the fact that that was like his final destination, I always wonder, like, hey, what was the symbolism and meaning behind that? Like,
Mm.
yeah, and
Uh,
did he know? Could he feel that it was coming?
and I've spoken with his wife at length about a lot of these things, and um, in a way that I know that she's comfortable sharing. She was just sharing that Chris, like you said, he was his brain just his processing, it got to the point where it just like really wouldn't turn off. And so the suffering, a lot of it came from just not being able to hit that toggle or that switch.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and the crazy thing is that he had, by his own words, unlocked a real dream, a dream come true. And the last podcast he ever recorded was named as such, about my dream come true.
Wow.
And it's very, very powerful. And on an even smaller level, you saw the letting go and the pulling away, and even the way that he talked and chose to train. Whereas before, the barbell was sacred. It was the attachment. This is the thing that if you want results, this is the way. And
Mm-hmm.
after meeting coaches like you and coaches like Diane, or even barbell coaches like Travis Mash, and another one is Julian Pinot from Strong Fit. And
Mm-hmm.
I remember all of the training videos I saw with Chris at the end. He was one of those big Strong Fit sandbags, 240, 260, something along those lines. So even then, he was like literally losing weight, right? He was
Yeah.
literally shedding
Yeah.
old
He was
identity,
losing weight.
getting more healthy, like stepping into this father figure that can do a handstand and can
Mm-hmm.
express in these new ways. And that I'm speaking out of turn, but I'm just imagining that Chris understood that the way to step into his fullest expression was allow himself to express differently in a physical way. If he
Mm-hmm.
wanted to access these new things, that he needed to find a new route, because these other paths were just so grooved, and it's easy to
Yeah.
fall back into those long-term grooves. And so either through his Instagram, through his physical practice, and like you said, some of the work and leading up, you could tell that there was a lot of this that he was letting go. And um, the what happened, and it just in a way, without question, it's terribly tragic that a man like that was lost. And we can look back at that moment, and we can also like really see how much positive impact and change has been from celebrating his life, and from
Mm-hmm.
celebrating his work, and celebrating his expression, and and
Mm-hmm.
and all of the debauchery, and all of the vice, and all of those late night conversations in the red light in his room. And whenever people tell me that they're maybe stuck, or often, man, I imagine you get this all the time as a coach. There are people that they're in this transition point, and they just don't know how to pivot. They have almost everything they need. They're just missing a few things to make that pivot. And when I can recognize that, I just gently just kind of brush them towards Barbell Buddha.
Mm.
Oh, you got a
Nice.
kid and a job, and you're like, you want to change your career and you just don't know how? Barbell Buddha.
Nice.
Oh, you're like really stuck up, and you're like tight and you're a big muscle bound dude, and you like don't know how to chill out? Barbell Buddha. And it's just like,
Mm-hmm.
anybody I can herd towards cats. And
That's amazing that he has you here to kind of represent and speak in many ways uh, for him. It's awesome.
well, I certainly I decided to get a master's degree in Chris Moore.
Nice, nice,
Reading the
nice,
books and
nice.
listening to it over and over again. And I guess if I not to say that we have to close it down, because I do have a couple of good, more questions for you. But one thing
Please hit me
I
with
want to
it.
share is like, the thing that really compelled me to do this was realizing, because I knew that I wanted it. I was like, I want somebody to celebrate him. And I
Hmm.
noticed that there was like, not only was he not being celebrated, like, no, after he passed, like, there was very little mention. There was a nice video. And as I've come to learn, and I can speak openly about this too, talking to Mike Bledsoe, how we've grown in our friendship and our connection and our trust together, that they also were waiting to grieve and to celebrate. Like Carl
Hmm.
said, like you said, you just kind of, like, it happened, and then you created some distance, and you just kind of like, we're just going to pack that
Hmm.
away nicely. Um, and so I knew that there were people like me wanting it because I wanted it. But the thing that I remember going like, oh no, shit, this really needs to happen. And I was listening to Mike's show, and Christmas Abbott was on the show, and she said, and she's had her first child, and she's in a different phase of her life. And she says, I've just been, I've just been really thinking about Chris a lot lately. And I
Mm.
was like, it's not just me. It's people like her. It's people like Travis, people like Carl. It's all these other people that like we want to rekindle this. We want to celebrate it. And the way I've tried to describe Barbell Shrugged is that they were like fucking Zeppelin, you know?
Hmm.
They did something that hadn't been done in our space, and
For
they all
sure.
played their part, and they're like the production was awesome, and the personalities and the way that everything bounced, and how they just it felt like you were in the room with them. You were
Hmm.
just like, man. And then like when Zeppelin, like when the drummer died, it was just so what they were carrying around was just so heavy, man.
Hmm.
And sometimes when things are that heavy, like you just don't know how to pick them back up. And I don't know why, but I could pick it back up. And it's a likely a benefit that I didn't know him because I
Hmm.
got to grieve in a way that was different. And the way that I get to do that is to celebrate and tell his story because that's my favorite thing to do. That's the thing that we share in common is we love telling stories and telling other people's stories and celebrating them and showing people what they do well because what we're getting from it is we're learning too.
Hmm.
By telling your story, I'm like living your story, and to live your story is to feel your story, and I get to get access to things that weren't there before.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
couldn't agree more.
Mm. All right. You ready?
Yeah.
What are you serious about right now in your life?
Nothing. Yeah,
God bless you.
nothing.
Can we
Yeah.
play? Can we play with the word serious then?
Yeah, yeah. Let's play with the word serious. So what I'm taking uh, into my life right now and spending a lot of time uh, pondering and understanding is a little bit of what I think Chris was doing towards the end of his life, where he knew consciously he could read uh, and he could see that, oh yeah, the great way is easy for those who have no preferences, right? Like, yeah, okay, he could say that, right?
Mm.
um but one thing is to say that, and the other thing is to embody that and to really integrate that. um so in many ways what I'm doing is I am simply going with the flow. I am trying to put myself right in the middle of the jet stream of life and unfolding and growing, and doing that from a physical perspective. I'm training in a way where I am simply going with the flow and using a structure to get there, a structure that I'm not allowing for it to become a prison for me. Although it's a practice that I'm going to adhere to. And when it has served me, I will make sure to break and get out of my system, integrate what I need, and move on, transcend. So that's one of the things that I'm doing and I'm taking very seriously, if we speak that way. And when I think about taking something seriously, I think about the word discipline, which is the return. It's the return to a practice and developing a habit. And in returning to a practice, one needs to be able to remember. And remember is realizing that I have deviated or I'm resting, and now I have to come back and developing the practice of returning. This is like a meditation. If I'm breathing and I'm just focusing on my breath and I drift off into thought, the moment I realize that I'm drifting out into thought and I become aware of that and I return to the breath, that's the moment that I'm practicing. So it's remembering that I have a practice. Also, the act of remembering in relationship to discipline is putting the members together. It's remembering, it's putting the pieces together. So what I'm taking very seriously is identifying what are the pieces. Well, I know there is a physical aspect of me that I want to be a part of developing, practicing. There is an emotional, a spiritual practice that I want to develop, and there is an intellectual practice, and the intellectual practice is the one of translating that which is happening emotionally through my body and into this world, which contextually can be a conversation like the one that you and I are having right now, building a business, building my craft, whatever it may be. So that's what I'm taking serious, my practice. And doing that, this is a little bit of what you were alluding to earlier, as an offering to others. And this kind of comes from the teachings of Ram Dass, who said, I work on myself as an offering to you. I work with you as a way of working on myself. That's what I'm taking seriously. And yeah, that comes through discipline, through practice, through awareness. And thankfully, we have so many tools to access that. One of them being listening to a podcast or to a show like this.
Mm. One story that I've gotten to let go, which is divine timing, because the show is Serious.Fun that we're on currently with the nice little Barbell Buddha Rediscovered breakout, is that like
Nice.
right when I land in the Serious.Fun show, serious period fun period, and it's a double entendre. You're welcome. Is that I realized that I had adopted this idea of what being serious was, and being serious is if you ask a child to play an adult, they do this, they frown, they like furl their brow and they get serious. And I realized that once I opened a business officially, I adopted this behavior that I learned, which was to be serious. So one of the stories that I've gotten to let go is that I have to be serious to be taken seriously. And I've upgraded it to I'm taken seriously because I'm intentional. And I've made a practice to be intentional with the things that I do. And that's why I can be taken seriously. So that's why I said, when you said nothing, I was like, of course it's nothing. Cause like Carl gets it, and it's like, he's been there. He's been to the, well, if you taking it, anything worth taking seriously is worth being made fun of. I don't remember who said that, but I was just like, yeah, of course. So the other side of this is the fun side. So what do you do for fun actually? What is fun in for you? And then like, what is fun in your philosophy, or what is your relationship to fun in your life?
Hmm. Yeah, that's one thing that I've realized, that in my life, I haven't allowed myself to have a lot of fun because I've been so serious in my practice. And now what is happening is that I'm practicing remembering to have fun. And to have fun is to simply see the joy that exists within our every single moment that we are experiencing. So right now, honestly, everything that I do is kind of fun. It gets hard sometimes, but it's fun. For example, I have kind of rekindled my relationship to my own training, and today I'm itching to practice my handstands. I'm going to be
Mm,
doing my hand balancing. I'm trying to unlock new positions and new movements, and that is fun. I know that when I'm in it, it sucks.
mm.
It's painful. There's suffering, but it's a fun process if you allow for it to be fun. So yeah, that's where I find fun. The other part that I find fun is this, right now, as I'm sitting here speaking to you, I was supposed to be in Sweden at this moment. We were moving there. That's why I left San Francisco and I couldn't see you in person.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm currently in Fresno, Central California, at the almost ripe age of 40 years old, living with my in-laws because we can't get out of the country at this moment. The travel ban is there. We're waiting for paperwork. So we're just kind of in limbo right now, waiting. And this can easily, if you're very serious about something, about getting to your destination, this could be frustrating. But it's fun. It's an opportunity to be like, oh my goodness, you've been offered this limbo here to organize yourself even more. And what seemed like a tedious job, something that is maybe not fun to do on paper, when you're doing it, feels good and can be fun when you're doing it with intention, as you were saying earlier. And yeah, I am really working. When I say working, I'm putting effortless effort into enjoying the process. And this is so cliche, it almost hurts when you hear it, but that's the truth. That's what I'm practicing. That's what I'm doing.
And the funny thing about cliches is that, like, the more that you start to listen to them, you go, God bless, this is
They're
a
true.
cliche for a reason, right?
Yeah.
And which is frustrating. So I owned a gym that I recently decided to transition, and the name of the gym is Recess. And it was because I wanted to
Nice.
rekindle, yeah, I wanted to rekindle that experience of playing on the playground, that feeling of like like you said, you're itching. You're literally itching to get to your handstand. And I
Mm-hmm.
just was imagining, like remembering that feeling of second grade, when you're sitting in the
Mm-hmm.
seat and you know that it's a beautiful sunshiny day and your teacher stands you up, she walks you down the hall and you get to those doors and those double, it's like, all the schools have double doors, you got to have the
Mm-hmm.
double doors. So it's double doors brushed up and you get that big burst of fresh light and you just take off, right? And there's no time, you're not, it's structured in the sense that there are some constraints, and the constraints being don't hurt other kids, don't get in the way of other kids having fun and other kids' autonomy. But rest of that was like self-structured. And we
Mm-hmm.
go out and it's like you got a ball and you got a group of kids and the game unveils itself. We go, oh, today we're playing soccer, but tomorrow we're playing basketball, but today we're going to play kickball. And it was like, how we know we didn't plan that. We didn't wake up, we didn't write down in the curriculum of school, the recess curriculum, that this is what we're going to do that day. And so if you can rekindle that sense of, and that was one of my number one questions. It's like, people feel stuck. I don't know what to do. I said, well, how did you play as a kid? It's
Yeah.
really wild to see people go, man, I forgot, I really forgot how to let that guard down or how to be fully present in the experience. You're not taking
Mm-hmm.
it in through your senses. I did my first CrossFit workout since like 2017. I was staying with a friend. He wanted to go to a CrossFit gym. Let's do it. Right. And like the old racehorse that I am, I know how the game is played. I know how the race is run. So I can like feel myself going through the pregame, what's about to happen. And then there was this brief moment where I was like, today, your goal is to take in the scene and to know exactly what song is playing, to know what the smell like, and to know what things are feeling like as they're happening. Make sure to make
Mm-hmm.
eye contact with every people. And now all of a sudden, what used to be this mindless experience, this new fresh opportunity to be the most mindful I've ever been in a gym. How much
Mm-hmm.
data can I take in? And that was the fun I was having. It used to be the workout, the act of moving this bar, moving that, getting on those rings, that was the fun I was having. This time it was like noticing all the things that were happening as the thing was happening. So there's this cliche of like, just have fun. And yet people want it to be hard. And this
Mm-hmm.
is one of my favorite Trojan horse questions, because we'd be like doing some movement or some crawling or things. And they're like, when are we going to get to the hard stuff? I'm like, oh, you want to get to the hard stuff, right? They're like, yeah, I want to get to the hard stuff. I'm like, cool. Is like, what are we doing? Like, I don't like this. I don't like what we're doing right now. I was like, oh, great. Cause we're in the hard stuff. Cause this is hard for you.
Mm-hmm.
Kicking your ass is really easy for you. This is
Mm-hmm.
what's hard for you. So we are doing what's hard. And they go, oh, fuck. Okay. Yeah, that's great. And the other thing that you said that I feel like is really valuable to talk about is um, you said looking to get in the jet stream
Mm-hmm.
within structure.
Yeah.
And one thing that happens in the process is, let's just say we've been training for a certain way for a really long time and we're feeling the weight of dogma start to push us down. It just feels, now it's become like burdensome and we're ready to break free. So we break out of this dogmatic system, and then we get into this like vast emptiness space, because we realize that the thing that we thought was the only way, turns out that it's not. Turns out that it's not. So now I can do anything. But if I can do everything, if there are no constraints, why would I do anything at all? There's no comparison. And so
Yeah. You have to choose.
exactly. And so even in our movement practice, I found that what helps people is where you provide constraints. And so if
Mm-hmm.
I have my bear, my monkey, my frogger, and I can be all over the place, yeah, I might find some new things here or there. But if I put you in a really small space and say you can't pick your right hand off the ground, you're going to find those transitions that were never even in your thing. And all we had to do is put a little constraint. So long-winded opener to get Carl to answer a question. What advice, what philosophy, what input could you give someone that's looking to add structure to their life, but also allows them to feel free and creative in those constraints?
Yeah, that's a great question. There's a lot to unpack here, but I'm gonna try to stick to answering the question.
Mm,
And I'm gonna start it, and I'm gonna preface it by sharing something that I heard a therapist who specializes in relationships and especially in intimacy say. This therapist said that, oh, if you want to rekindle your intimacy, create a rule. And the rule is that for a week, we're not allowed to be intimate, and see what happens. And what happens is that when you create a rule that says that you're not allowed to do the thing that you're struggling to do, all of a sudden you feel free. And once you start to feel free, you start to reconnect with what you're needing, with what you really need, and that being in relationship to your intention, and all of a sudden allowing you to move closer to the person that you're trying to rekindle that intimacy with. So, oh, do you want to get on a diet? Do you want to change your nutrition? Set a rule and say, you know what? I'm allowed to eat as many cookies as I want this week. See what happens. Maybe day one you're like, oh yeah, the cookie monster, you know? And then all of a sudden you're feeling so sick and disgusting. You're like, wait, what am I doing? And you may do it again the next day and the next day, but something may hit there that sets you free and says, you know what? Instead of doing cookies until I feel sick, today I'm going to set a new rule. I'm going to have only 3 cookies a day. And all of a sudden you have created a new boundary, a new structure. And what I wanted to unpack was that if you know that recess, for example, is important, you got to schedule it. So put it on the calendar and commit to it and see what happens. What ends up happening is that when you put something that you know you need on the calendar and you commit to it, you do it. Over time, it becomes a habit. And when that becomes a habit, if it's a habit that is truly nurturing you, it's going to push away all the habits that are not nurturing you, that are not serving you. The other aspect of recess that I found interesting, just as you were saying it, is I started thinking about resuscitation. Recess is bringing back to life. What is it that we're bringing back to life through the thing that we're scheduling? Having that kind of awareness is key. So identifying what is it that you need, and ultimately, how does that feel when it's alive in you? That's what you are actually pursuing. That's what's bringing you into the jet stream. And that's my long-winded answer on what the process may be for somebody who's trying to transition. Create a rule and say, I don't have to do this, or better yet, I'm not going to do this, and see what happens over time. You start to realize that when you're free, you are autonomous, and when you are autonomous, you actually choose that which is good for you.
One thing that Chris really helped me unpack is, and I think that's something that we can dive into, is the difference between a habit and a ritual. And that's a common question that I'll ask people. It's like, what's the difference between a habit and a ritual? And the answer that I'm always fishing for is mindfulness. Habits are things that we do without thinking. Rituals are things that we do with intention. And at first, we need to create rituals in order to develop habits. And so for Chris, it was Vice Friday. That was the ritual. That was the celebration. We do it on purpose. We anchor in this experience because on Tuesday, when we do want to be the cookie monster, we realize that, or even just have that one or two, we realize, well, hey, I've actually gotten an opportunity to anchor in this beautiful experience with people that I love, my friends, my family, and I'm going to get to go all the way on Friday. And so by adding that mindfulness, we then create the meaning that this is important to us. Like you said, put it on your calendar. That's part of the ritual. How can you have a ritual if it's not scheduled? Because then it's not intentional. By just saying, I'm making the decision, I'm putting it on the calendar. This is intentional. That over time, now that you've done it, you've put in that intention over week after week after week, then you're like, I know what's happening on Friday. It's the habitual Vice Friday. I'm still going to be present with it, but now I don't have to put as much effort into it because it's now part of who I am. And it does take a while before things that begin to integrate. And I imagine that one of the biggest things that you run into is one of the biggest things that I run into, which is that we want the shit now. You want to move to Sweden now. I want to get that handstand now. And creates that friction, creates that expectation that we're supposed to receive something out of it, takes us out of the experience. And before you know it, I'm nervous, so I'm habitually biting my nails. or I'm
Mm-hmm.
habitually grabbing that extra drink. And so, yeah, do you have any current rituals that you're crafting in your life right now?
Well, I mean, rituals, I definitely do, and they're my practice. So I sit down to meditate. Sometimes I stand, or sometimes I lie down. I practice some breath work. I have my handstand training. I have my writing and journaling training. I work with my students. That's a practice. Yeah. So rituals are all over the place. The biggest aspect of the ritual um is being able to fully experience the ritual. It's kind of like I went to Catholic school, and if you would eat, of course everybody would say grace in the beginning of the meal. um, you notice that as you're saying grace over time, it's just kind of like you're just saying words. And I know that there's power in words, but you're not totally feeling it nor engaged with it. You're just saying it out of habit. How can you go beyond the ritual, beyond the habit, and access the true meaning? And that is an exercise on self-awareness. And I think or on awareness, period. And I think that is the ritual that I'm currently working on, is noticing and then becoming fully engaged, putting all of my attention on the intention um, when exercising the ritual. So it's the ritual of being aware during the ritual itself.
Mm, dude.
Meta.
Exactly how Chris liked it, by the way,
Yeah, yeah, layers, levels,
layers
levels.
and levels. Well, man, I've had such a blast. This is truly like unlocking a new achievement for me to be able to jam on a microphone with Carl. And yo, straight up, like, I'll just go ahead. Yeah, like I explicitly remember watching the Instagram, and I'm following Carl because I'm now a big fan. And Carl's got his feet up in a chair, and he's in a massage chair, and he's in Korea. And I was like, I know that apartment. What the hell is Carl doing in my chair? I can't even tell you how many massages I've had in the same apartment. And I remember that point. I was like, dude, I don't know how else to explain it. I was like, it was like the 1 degree of separation. And for
Mhm.
me, it was like, I'm right fucking there. It's like Carl's getting a massage in the chair that I've sat in our friend's apartment. And I just, yeah, being able to close this loop for me after so many years has been really special. So I'm grateful that you took some time out with me today. And I imagine when people make it, or we got about 50 minutes in, there's gonna be a lot to unpack for them in this episode. So I imagine they'll listen to it a few times. Anything you want to
That's so cool.
bounce out of here?
Well, I maybe just to riff off of this massage chair at Brian's place.
Yeah, tell me.
Yeah, in Seoul, South Korea. Imagine that feeling that you had when you saw me in that chair, where you're like, "Whoa, we don't know each other, but we're so connected." What if that chair was the planet Earth for every single one of us, and we could experience that every day? Be like, "Oh, that person is in the same chair that I." It's not that I was in it; I am in it right
Mm,
now.
mm,
That brings us all closer together. And add this to the mix. Uh, Add to the mix somebody who is not just sitting in your chair, but on this planet, that you don't agree with, you don't like that much, you don't admire. In fact, you maybe even have negative feelings towards, and realize that that person, that thing is a part of you as well. What can you do to allow for that to be in you in a way that you can hold it and honor it and take care of it, and maybe even allow that to unfold? And that maybe being the solution to all the problems that you think you're facing on this planet. Or in this life. I think that's very powerful. So think about the massage chair massaging all of that out, the good and the bad.
mm. And honestly, man, at a time that we're in right now, as we're having this podcast, those words are very important and very valuable. So, yes, it is time to take the seat of awareness, the chair, be in the seat, allow yourself to, because getting the knots massaged is not always comfortable.
Wow, it's going to be painful
Yeah.
sometimes. Yeah.
Man.
But the outcome can be very powerful. And just because it's not where you think it should be right now doesn't mean that it's over. It continues on, just like Chris's life continues on through your voice now, which I feel like I have sat with you and with Chris here during this time together. So it's awesome.
Awesome, man. Thank you so much. Man, fucking Carl Paoli, everybody. Thank you, Carl. I appreciate you being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Awesome.